Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's complimentary webinar from ICMI, The Best Engagement Practices Your Customers Really Want, sponsored by USAN. I'm Paul Pope, Virtual Classroom Administrator for ICMI, and I'm your host for today. Before we begin, let's do some housekeeping. First, I'll ask that you take a moment to disable your pop-up blockers if they're on. You'll notice that there are several icons at the bottom of the console window. The first allows you to see the presentation slides, so make sure that one's maximized. Next is the Q&A icon. We'll be hosting a live Q&A throughout this webinar, so you can participate by asking questions at any time during the presentation. All you have to do is type your question into that window and click Submit. Now, if you're experiencing any technical problems during the presentation, you can click the question mark icon on the console to access the Event Help Guide. Clicking the other icons on the console will allow you to access our presenters' bios, direct you to learn more about our sponsor, USAN, or find out about other upcoming ICMI webinars. You can also download a copy of today's presentation in PDF format. And now I have the great pleasure of introducing to you our esteemed panel of presenters. Please welcome Richard R. Shapiro, founder and president of the Center for Client Retention, and Ian Hunter, senior sales engineer from USAN. Thank you all very much for joining us. Again, we encourage you to share what you're learning here today. We encourage you to be social throughout this webinar. You can access your Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn accounts directly from the webinar console. All you have to do is log in and you can share your insights in real time. And I'd also like to take a moment to note that the hashtag for USAN is incorrect on this slide. Please use @USAN_solutions. All right, before I hand things off to Richard, I'd like to first review the objectives for today's webinar. Our objectives include a conversation about the revolution that's occurring in the way customers interact. Social, mobile, and self-service channels give customers much more control. Gain a better understanding of what customers really want from customer service. And we'll learn about customer engagement strategies to make customers feel welcomed, feel valued, and feel understood. Richard will be giving away a signed copy of his book, The Welcomer Edge, Unlocking the Secrets to Repeat Business, to a random participant who engages in the Q&A at the end of the presentation. Feel free to put your question in during the presentation so Richard and Ian can answer them all at the end. Let's welcome Richard.
Hello, this is Richard Shapiro. If you really think about it, there's a significant difference between delivering customer service and creating customer loyalty. And understanding that difference in today's highly global and competitive economy can really make the difference for many companies, whether they thrive, just survive, or fail over the next decade. I was really fortunate enough to have learned the difference between delivering customer service and creating customer loyalty at age 10. And you can imagine that learning that important lesson at such an early age had a significant impact on my life. In my early teens, my dad owned a small men's clothing store in northern New Jersey. And during the busiest holidays of the year, which were Father's Day and Christmas, my dad had me working at the store at the cash register. And actually, that's a picture of me about age 10 on the left, and my dad about the same, during that same period. Playing basketball. And working at the cash register, it really was a fun job, because what 10-year-old kid wouldn't want to be collecting money all day? Of course, the only problem was, at the end of the day, I had to give the money back. But more important than being a fun job, it really was an education, because I could see my dad interacting with people as they entered the store. And the key word here is people. Solely by viewing the actions of my dad, I learned that he saw all customers as people first, customers or potential customers second. He also welcomed everybody into the store, just like he would welcome them into our home. And when my father saw somebody that he knew walking through the door, his first question was never, how can I help you today? But rather, how was your weekend? How was their daughter's wedding that they had planned for such a long time? Did their son get into the college of their choice? My dad was much more interested in the customer's state of mind than their method of payment. And if my father didn't know the person as they walked through the door, he certainly knew something about them when he left. He learned, certainly what their name was, what brought them into the store, which was important in any business. And also he would try to remember something unique about them that he could recall in the next visit. He had a terrific knack for that. And my dad didn't learn this information by asking a bunch of robotic questions or by giving them a computerized questionnaire. My dad learned this information by engaging his customers and interacting with them as people. And in this highly technical and mobile society we live in today, customers do crave human interaction. And even if they don't think they crave it, when they do find someone who's warm, welcoming, and makes them feel valued and understood, they greatly appreciate it. So I'm delivering my presentation today, and I'm going to ask you after the presentation just to remember one thing, that delivering excellent, exceptional, or even extraordinary customer service does not guarantee repeat business. It just doesn't. You need to make a great first impression, and you need to make customers feel welcome, valued, understood, no matter what the channel of communication. And in so many cases, it really is the little things, that make such a big difference. But as a general rule, if you can train your associates to welcome everyone into their contact center or a store or a social media environment, just like you'd welcome them or they would welcome them into their home, the rest will pretty much come automatically. In 2007, I was taking a vacation in New Jersey on the beach. Jersey has great beaches for those of you who haven't been here before. And I was thinking about my dad, and I was also thinking about why I had joined, one gym over another during this period. I was actually on vacation for about a month, so it was important. Everybody knows that you overeat and overdrink. So I wanted to find a gym, that I could join for the month. So about a month before my rental, I visited 4 gyms in the area, and the one that I selected was Gold's Gym in Point Pleasant. And I didn't join Gold's because of the amenities, the location, or the fees. I selected Gold's because Andy, the front desk supervisor, was the one that I interacted with. And from the second I met Andy, he just made me feel so welcomed, important, and appreciated. And when he gave me a tour of the facility, he said hello to every member that was there, even though he might have only seen them like 10 minutes before. Andy, just like my dad, really saw me as not as a member, but as a person first. And he used to say, "Rich, how you doing today? How was your workout?" If I missed a day, Andy would give me a hard time. And thinking about Andy, I realized that my dad and Andy were alike. My dad had passed away many, many years ago, but they were both so welcoming. So I decided to name people like my dad and Andy welcomers, and thought to myself, is it possible that all service and sales providers actually fall into different categories? So in thinking about my dad and Andy and also about my daily interactions, I realized that all service and sales providers fall into 4 categories. And before I share the categories with you, I was thinking, why would this be beneficial? Well, it would be beneficial because if businesses know that welcomers exist and make the best sales and service folks, they could hire welcomers, and they could also classify the other people and make it a lot easier to train them. So now you're either going to love me or hate me the rest of your lives, because you'll never be able to interact with either a service or sales representative again without thinking of which category they fall in. The categories are welcomers, robots, the indifferent, and hostile. Welcomers, robots, indifferent, and hostiles. Welcomers are at the top of the pyramid. They're the ones that see the customers a person first, customer second. They automatically welcome everybody into whatever service environment just like they'd welcome them into their home. The largest category are the robots. And robots might say the right thing, they might follow the procedures, but they really never connect with the customer. So in effect, they're just like a mechanical robot that goes through the motions but they don't have the emotions. Then you have the indifferent who, when you encounter them, in a face-to-face situation, they kind of like walk away from you. And it's almost easier in some ways to realize you have an indifferent on the phone, because as soon as you pick up the phone or they start talking, you know that you must have interrupted their lunch, or you got them on a break, or it's a bad day. They don't want to talk to you that day or that moment, and they certainly don't want you calling back. They don't really care. And then there's the hostiles, who are just plain nasty people. They're nasty to customers, and it's a small percentage, but they do exist. I've encountered them, and I'm sure you have too. But they're also nasty to their fellow associates. And I used to say that hostiles should only be in the back office with equipment or merchandise, but I think I decided in the past couple of months to eliminate the equipment, because in this technology world, we can't have equipment handled by hostile people either, and just put them in the stockroom. If you have to have a hostile in your employee, please do not put them on the front line. So in coming up with these 4 categories, I always had wanted to write a book, and I thought, this would make an excellent subject for a book, because once again, if businesses knew that welcomers exist and what their traits were and they could hire them, they'd be one step ahead. But in order to write a book, you really have to do research. So that's what I did. My research goals were the following. Number 1, I really wanted to test my hypotheses. I wanted to make sure that all service and sales associates did fall into the 4 categories. Second, I wanted to find welcomers along the way. I really couldn't write a book just based, on my dad and Andy. I needed to explore the subject and find a lot more welcomers and really learn about them, uncover their common traits. Because once again, if I share with you the common traits, and you know what the common traits of a welcomer are, every time you have a new hire, whether that's you're replacing someone or you're adding to your staff, you're going to be one step ahead. And lastly, which was really important, I wanted to determine, since I knew in my head that probably the largest category were robots, that I wanted to understand if robots could be trained to act and think like welcomers. So I came up with the 4 categories. And the way I did my research is that over a 3-year period, I conducted hundreds of mystery shopper visits throughout the country. Every time I went on vacation or every time I took a business trip, I'd rent a car and go out to suburban areas, rural areas, stay in the city, visited farmlands, and I would act as the customer, or sometimes, actually most of the time, I would just walk into a dental office or a library or museum or a jewelry store or bank, and I would listen to the interaction in all parts of the country between the service or sales representative and the customer. I also initiated hundreds of telephone inquiries into all kinds of businesses and contact centers, and I would pose questions like, I just heard about your product, or I just signed up for your new service, something that I wanted to see how they interacted with me. And lastly, I emailed e-commerce sites to ask questions about merchandise, etc. So what did I really learn after doing this for a 3-year period, and what did I eventually put in my book? I learned that, number 1, hold on a second. Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go over this until the first thing I learned is that the personalization of customer service has practically disappeared. And I think everybody in general might say that. Number 2, I learned that people like my dad, still exist. Just like I found Andy so many years afterwards, I also found plenty of people like Andy and my dad. Third, I did find, and I confirmed through research, that welcomers actually make the best service and sales associates. Just hearing the interaction and talking to the welcomer, as well as many cases, I'd interview their bosses and find out about their work ethic, etc. I absolutely proved that welcomers make the best sales and service associates. I also learned that a percentage of robot acting representatives can be taught to think and perform like a welcomer. And what I really found is that most welcomers really kind of segmented their interaction naturally into three basic components: the greet, the assist, and the leave behind. And the greet is really to connect with the customer before you actually answer their question or respond to their inquiry. The assist is really to help them as much as possible, including not only answering their question, but adding additional useful information, maybe telling them about a website or about a social media Facebook page that they might enjoy looking at. And lastly, the leave behind, which is really to communicate to the customer that you really do want to speak to them again or see them again, etc. Additionally, which is on the screen now, businesses do confuse providing good service with generating repeat patrons. And that was one of my earlier statements, that it's really important to understand that even if delivering customer service is an important or critical component of customer retention, but really you need to build relationships. So if you just provide good service and the customer walks away, it's not going to generate a repeat patron or guarantee that you're going to do that. But if you can build a relationship as well as provide excellent customer service, it's going to generate repeat patrons. And the last thing is that no matter what the channel, people still want to feel important, appreciated, and valued by whoever they're doing business with. It's an old saying that you only have one opportunity to make a great first impression, and basically you only have one opportunity to really make a customer feel welcomed in the first initial seconds of the encounter. It probably depends on the channel, whether it's 5, 10, or 15 seconds, but you have one opportunity to really provide an excellent and welcoming first impression. And it's also critical to listen to your IVR recordings, look at your website, Facebook pages, and mobile apps, and think to yourself, does this sound or look welcoming? Is it a pleasant voice that you have on the IVR? Is this the message that you want your customers to remember? Is it easy to navigate? Are the options clear? Is the branding and messaging consistent among all channels? I would say about 90% of all IVRs that I listen to, which you probably listen to also, the message is, your call is important to us, a representative will be with you shortly. It's not even a friendly recording. And this is the company's first impression. This is like as if you're opening door to your home. Is that, would you say to somebody who just walked in, your visit is important to us, I will be with you shortly? No. You'd give them a big hello, maybe a firm handshake, a kiss or a hug. That's the way you'd welcome somebody into your home. So, for instance, you might say on the recording, which is, by the way, you only have to do a recording once. That's also the ridiculous part about this. But hello, and thank you for calling ABC Company. One of our representatives will be so happy to assist you as soon as possible. Depending on our call volume, your wait time may be a few minutes. For expedited service, please visit our website at www.abc.com to chat with a live representative. So it's important in almost all cases, anybody who has a contact center environment has an IVR message at the beginning. And it's very simple to have a very welcoming and friendly sounding IVR. And I think it's important that companies do that. So let's go over some things that are really little things but can really make a big difference. Maybe it is that special hug, when someone visits your home, or when you call someone, they just give you that big hello, and you know that instantly, that they're glad, to see you. If you were calling your best friend or your best friend was calling you, I'm sure you'd give them a really, really big hello or expect a big hello from your friend. And if you were at a cocktail party, let's say, and somebody invites you to join your group of friends, it's that little thing that can make a big difference. So I do have several suggestions that I think can make a big difference, can make people feel, more welcome, important, and valued. The first thing is really personalizing the encounter. And what I mean by that is trying to say something that's not in the script, that maybe you pick up on the phone. I mean, if you're in a contact center and you hear a dog barking in the background, don't ignore it. Say, oh, is that your pet or is that your dog? What kind? Some of these things just take seconds, but they help build a connection. Or if it's on a Friday, just saying like, I hope you have a great weekend. Or if it's on a Monday, not how was your weekend, because that might be an extended conversation, but just saying, I hope you did have a good weekend. It just turns that customer into a person. Another thing that's really key in trying to personalize the encounter is really tailoring the scripting to the appropriate loyalty type. Generally, customers do fall into 4 specific categories. They could be a prospective customer who's thinking about purchasing your product or service. They could be a first-time customer who has some kind of question about how to apply, a cosmetic, or they just bought a new TV and they're not sure how to hook it up. And you have exclusive and non-exclusive customers. And by tailoring the message, if somebody calls and they're thinking about purchasing your product, if you really welcome them and sound welcoming and say, you know what, I appreciate that you're inquiring about our product or about our service, and we just value our customers so much, and if you decide to purchase our product or service, you're going to be really happy. Or if they're a first-time customers actually happen to be the most vulnerable to competition. In almost any kind of business, the first-year churn rate is twice as high as your typical churn rate in any kind of environment. Because if somebody has an issue with a product or an issue with a service, in their initial account, they're just not going to have the patience to, remain with that service. It would be like if you, you moved into a new neighborhood and you went into a cleaner for the first time, and when you picked up your garments, there was a spot there that you didn't think was there before. Well, if you've used this cleaner like 1 or 2 times, and you see this spot, most likely there's 5 million cleaners, you're probably going to go to another one. But if you've been going to the same cleaner for 5 years and you see a spot, you're probably going to be a lot more patient and go back, and I'm sure also the store is going to do something for you. So if somebody also is a first-time customer, just saying, I see that you just bought this product or you enrolled in this service, once again, we really appreciate that. Exclusive and non-exclusive, in so many cases, I know in my case, I use 3 different banks for my business. And in other cases, other companies might use one financial institution. Well, how do you get that? In most cases, customers do split their business, whether it's consumer or B2B, among several different suppliers. So it's really critical to build a relationship, because in my particular case, one of these 3 banks could probably easily get some more of my business just by building that extra special relationship. So when it's not a non-exclusive kind of relationship customer, there's a lot of opportunity there to increase your sales and revenue. Customers are different types, but all customers are people. And it doesn't matter whether it's an email or a phone or a face-to-face counter. Each one has a different emotion when they call you, and at different times they have different emotions. And one of the courses that I took in my corporate world that I thought was the best course ever was an active listening course before I started my business 25 years ago. And if you can listen to the customer's emotion, it's one of the best ways to connect. I mean, everybody who calls you or emails you or you see in a face-to-face environment is either frustrated, happy, concerned, excited, disappointed, elated. They have some kind of emotion. And if you can listen for that emotion, and if somebody, is frustrated and you say, listen, I hear you're frustrated, but I really want to help you, and they are frustrated, it's just going to normalize the entire situation, and you're going to have an automatic connection. And the beauty of active listening, once you really, can excel at it, is if you say to someone, I really hear you're frustrated, and they come back and say, I'm not frustrated, I'm angry, all you have to do is say, well, I hear you're angry, but I want to help you. And absolutely, positively, it'll build a terrific connection with the person, and then you can go about helping them and serving them as a customer. Some other things you can really do are further educate. In so many cases, customers, call with a question, or they call, or they email your company, or they come into your store, and they ask a question, or they have a concern, and you address that. In all our research, we have found that those customers who feel that the representative not only answered their question or addressed their concern, but provided them additional education, maybe told them where something was, where it originated from, or when they're going to get more stock, or about their website, or about some sale that's coming up in the future. People love that, and those people are consumers that feel that the rep provided additional information and spent additional time on the phone absolutely are more delighted than those that don't. Using the word help, everybody wants help. And by just using the word help, saying, I'd like to help you, I want to help you, even if you can't necessarily, even if you have to refer them to somebody else, people like to be helped, even if you can't always provide the answer. And just employing the word help in either an email or a phone or face-to-face interaction can go a long way. Invite the customer to return. That's something that very few companies do in any kind of situation, especially in a contact center environment. Telling the customer, I want to hear from you again. I want to see you again. Even if it's a team kind of concept, saying, we want to hear from you again. We want to answer your questions if you ever have them again. I might not be the same person that you reach again, but I have a terrific team here, and that's what our department is for. Convey the value of that department. And lastly, of course, thank them, for contacting you. With social media, it's really critical, and there's a lot of software programs out there now, but it's really critical to not just listen to what's out in the social media channels, but to engage the customer. 90% of all consumers who post something on a company's Facebook page expect the company to respond, whether it's a compliment or a concern, a complaint, etc. 90% absolutely positively expect the company to respond. And if there's some kind of serious issue that is being shared, being social media, telling the customer that it requires special attention and inviting them to call you, is important, because, you don't want to start communicating back and forth about something serious, because you really need more information anyway. But telling the customer that it's in their best interest to contact you, through either a telephone call or email to get the problem fixed generally does work in most cases. When we talk about emails versus telephone calls, or responding by a telephone call or an email, for centuries people have used the written word to convey, friendship, poetry, etc. And there's absolutely no reason why an email can't be as welcoming, as a telephone conversation. Recently I had a problem with the Wall Street Journal. This was a few months ago, where I tried to post a comment, to a social media site or a blog, and it didn't work. And I emailed the person at the bottom, and within an hour, Dimitri called me back. Dimitri sent me an email saying, Mr. Shapiro, I'm really sorry, that you had this issue. Your comment is really important to us. We want to help you. Sometimes this does happen. Here's my cell number. I want to walk you through the issue so you get it resolved. And here's, the number. Here's, when you can reach me. And I reached her, by phone. She was just as welcoming, of course, when I had the conversation. The problem was resolved, and I really felt so good that the Wall Street Journal did value me as a customer, and they made me feel that the comment that I was going to make was really important. You also want to respond to, generally, even though I've been talking about different channels and not so much talking about mobile per se, but you do want to respond to questions or complaints trying to use the same channel that the customer contacted you with, by email, actually by phone or social media. And but sometimes you do have to take it offline and say in your personal interest it is better if you communicate with me by phone or email. And when a customer tells you they like your product and they're thinking about trying it, always acknowledge this and enthusiastically thank them. I mean, in so many cases, especially when people are excited about something, if you can acknowledge that excitement and really thank them, that's going to go a long way to building loyalty. So, when I get invited to someone's home, for the first time, I just love to hear the host say, tell me what you want to drink, give me your jacket, let's go on a tour. When someone offers me a drink, takes me on a tour of their home, points out some of the family photos, it just makes me feel so much more welcome and comfortable in that kind of environment. And it doesn't matter whether it's the fanciest house on the block or the most modest, it makes me feel good. Your customer service department, is definitely the home of your company. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's a store or a customer service environment or a bank teller. That window is the home of your company, and it's the most important department in your company. By changing the mindset of your associates, communicating that they should welcome customers or consumers into the contact center or into their store or into their website or e-commerce site as if they were welcoming them into their homes, and by training your representatives to adjust the scripting based on loyalty segmentation and listening to the underlying emotion of each customer, it will make your company's home, your department, your store, your business, the most valuable house on the block. I can't hear you, but you've been a great audience, and thanks so much for making me feel, especially ICMI, for making me feel welcome, important, and my message appreciated today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ian.
Okay, thanks, Richard. First off, I wanted to say how much I loved your book. The research was really fascinating. I really love the stories of the real-life welcomers in there. There was one in particular that stood out about a lady cashier who jumped over a counter literally to help a customer. And you said in the book she was like a pole vaulter flying over the counter, and that was just such a great image. But the book really highlights...
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. The book really highlights people with an innate ability to connect with customers and what makes them tick and how that makes a difference for customer experience. I'm sure we all have a welcomer story, so I just feel compelled to share a short one of mine. Years ago, our family went to a restaurant, and there was a waitress who just gave us fantastic service. She was friendly, talkative, the whole 9 yards. And at one point, my dad, I believe, asked for an extra lemon for a glass of water or something. So instead of bringing an extra lemon, she brought an entire bowl full of lemons. And that was just one little sign of one of the things that she did to provide excellent service. So after the meal, my dad asked her to get the manager, and she looked just absolutely terrified until when he came over, he just started gushing about what sort of great service she provided and what a difference it made and that we would be coming back. So it's just so true about how an attitude like that can make such a big difference. So what I hope to accomplish in my time here is to basically talk about two things. One, some ways to enable the welcomers and welcomer wannabes in your organization to do what they do best, and also how to use technology to build some welcomer-like behavior into your non-human systems, because there's certainly plenty of those in the contact center, and it can really make a big difference. For example, what if the TSA had welcomers? I think perhaps they might screen them out. I'm kidding, of course. No offense to any government agencies that may or may not be monitoring out there. But it could really make a huge difference in lots of different organizations. As mentioned in the book, again, welcomers can indeed be effective even through automated systems like ACD and email and chat. And USAN, of course, provides a customer engagement platform that can enable that. One of the challenges is that in person there are queues to play off of that you don't have remotely, through a phone or through email. So we need to help those employees out by providing additional information about the person on the line or the person they're communicating with. ACDs typically only give regular customer info, like your address and phone number, although they don't even get that right all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked for a phone number by a rep that I just called, and I don't know what world that makes any sense in, but it's really prevalent. But for example, what if an ACD could provide a weather forecast for the area where the person lives? So if you have their zip code, you could pop up the weather, and someone could say, oh, I see you're in Denver. I hear it's beautiful out there today, or something to that effect. What about information about their birthday, or even a belated birthday? Could you imagine if you called into a company and the agent said, oh, happy belated birthday. We'll see, it was last Wednesday. Was it fun? And there's just a connection that happens there that isn't common. Some other things about a history of when they contacted them last and say, oh, we haven't talked to you in a while. How are things going? I see it's been 6 months or something. That's just another little example. Our social media, if the agent had access to recent social media activity, they could say, thanks for that like, or, I saw that tweet recently and I really appreciate your opinion, or I'm concerned about your bad situation. Or another thing that you point out in the book, Richard, is treating new customers specially. You could have a complete separate section of the call center dedicated to first-time callers and have the system route first-time callers automatically to that group and treat them specially. And then once we get past the meet stage there, or the greet stage there, once the conversation is established, what if the system could provide customized offers based on prior purchases or the time of year or even demographic information about the caller that is on file? For instance, Target once started sending coupons to a girl based on her search history and her purchase history on the site. That didn't work out so well. That's actually how her dad found out that she was pregnant. That's probably not the best example, but it may be one that everyone's heard of. And Target did a great job of data mining there, but their execution might have been a little better. At USAN, we also have the concept of a complete interaction history where agents could easily see every contact the customer has had with the company, from phone calls to purchases, social media contacts, and even potentially store visits or direct mail campaigns. We can integrate with virtually any other system to give those welcomer agents unparalleled access to information, and having that can really enable revolutionary service. Now, what about after the interaction? Again, in the book, you talk about the importance of following up after something like as simple as a password reset. You could queue an agent to send that message personally rather than just have it go out automatically. Or if you apply that concept to automatically queuing up a follow-up after every purchase or even a non-purchase, in some cases like maybe a car sale website that every purchase is significant and you don't want to let anyone get away, you actually have a system that literally queues personal follow-ups for any type of interaction whatsoever. And custom workflow-based scripts can ensure that that sort of detail doesn't get missed, but you want to watch out that they don't sound scripted. In fact, I think someone's posted a question about dropping the script, and I think that might be appropriate for more experienced agents, but with a typical turnover in call centers, I'd be kind of wary of that. You could perhaps tailor the script even more specifically based not only on like the skill group, but the agent's skill level. That's just a thought that came up to me while I was looking at the questions. So those are some things that you can do to help your contact center agents become more genuine customer servants, kind of turn some of those robots into more welcomer types. But what about systems that don't have employees on the other end? IVRs. IVRs are the classic thing that everybody just loves to hate. It's perhaps a necessity to keep labor costs down, but who doesn't hate dealing with IVRs? In a blog post recently, Richard mentioned how he fired a car rental company for having poor customer service. I think there were long lines at the counter, and it was just an awful time. Well, once I fired a TV provider solely because of their bad IVR. Once I got to their agents on the phone, they were fantastic and very helpful, but I still canceled my contract with the company because their IVR was just so lousy. I hated to call them and actually told them that as I canceled the contract. And so I thought it would be kind of funny to look at some examples of bad IVR messages. So first off, here's your typical type message. Thank you for calling the big company. Calls may be recorded for quality assurance purposes. Please hold for the next representative. Typical, pretty robotic, nothing really interesting there. Then we can get into indifferent messages. It could just be as short as, calls may be recorded. All agents are busy. Please hold. Not much fun there either. But what if you had a hostile IVR? Watch out. We tape all our calls. We're busy serving people who are here before you, so cool your jets and listen to this 40-minute flute solo. I could imagine someone's reaction at being treated like that. But instead, here's my idea of what an IVR message might sound like. Hi, Richard. This is Hal, your automated attendant. We'd like you to know that we record some of our calls so we can make sure that all of our employees treat you the way that we train them to, and we hope that you don't mind. We apologize for the delay. We're providing excellent service to some of your fellow customers. By the way, thank you for your recent Facebook like. We like you too. Someone will be right with you. Or how about an IVR message that says some more detailed information like, I can see that you have an order that's due to ship soon. Press 1 if that's why you're calling. Being able to anticipate the customer's needs or tailoring the process to their specific situation clearly shows that the focus is on the customer rather than your convenience. And USAN's customer engagement platform enables this kind of logic within any part of your call center systems. So the greeting itself is key, but what about attention retainers? Those are the messages that repeat while you're on hold and say, all agents are still busy, please continue to hold. Well, some systems at least provide you some information, like your number 7 in queue, estimated hold time is 15 minutes, and that kind of thing. But what if a system could individualize your experience and actually assist you while you are on hold? If the agent desktop can provide customers offers for each specific caller, why not the IVR? How about if it said, while you're waiting, since you just purchased our platinum level widget, for example, would you like to hear about protection plans to ensure it lasts a long time? If so, press 1, or you may continue to hold. You get the idea. The concept is that there's an engine running on the front end that can look for exceptions and change the IVR dynamically based on that customer's specific experience. So then what about follow-through? Some of you may use the IVR for outbound notification. What if you used it for additional customer service improvements? What if you had, for example, a password reset campaign? You could call out to each customer and say, thank you for resetting your password at the widget company. We want to be sure that you were able to complete the process and get what you needed from our site. If you had any problems whatsoever, press 1 and we'll reach out to you for help. Otherwise, just hang up knowing that we're here to help whatever your need. That is, of course, if you didn't want to have an agent contact them personally, well, like we talked about earlier, which might be better or more costly. So there are some fantastic opportunities for higher touch contact that not only improve customer service, but can actually keep costs down too. Think of some obvious reasons that your customer might want to follow up after a transaction, such as checking a shipping date or on a status of a backordered item, confirm a payment or deposit. I could go on. But what if your system proactively notified them before they even had the need to call in? That sort of concierge level service really, really goes a long way. And of course, the USAN CE platform can help with all this. One thing to think about, though, is customer experience isn't really something that you do per se. It's something within you, or within your welcomer employees, and within the culture of your company, kind of like good health. I make an analogy with customer experience to health. You can't do healthy. That doesn't really describe an action, but you can get healthier. Harley Manning at Forrester defined customer experience as how customers perceive their interactions with your company. He further defined an interaction as when you and your customers have any two-way exchange. While we're on definitions, Forrester says that engagement is a term that marketers use to describe customer interaction. Again, not a very specific action that you can take. For example, like go get healthy. You need something specific like a plan or some tools, yoga class, weights, or healthier food. So similarly, in the call center industry, we have tools like agent training, consultants that help improve back-end processes. We could have interview processes that identify welcomer employees, or we could have technology that directly enables this kind of behavior. Once you have that technology in place, the limit is your own imagination. Daniel Pink blogs about changing the way that we work, and one of my favorite topics of his is what he calls emotionally intelligent signage. Let that sign sink in for a second. I posted a link to that on my neighborhood Facebook page, and a couple weeks later the neighborhood association had bought some, and the signs went up all over our neighborhood. It struck a chord with everyone because it reaches you at a more personal level than slow children. Isn't that a little offensive anyway, calling people's children slow? I never really liked that sign. Anyway, which one works better? When you write agent scripts or IVR messages or anything like that, simply apply this concept of emotionally intelligent messaging. Instead of following a standard script that everyone uses because some attorney approved it for a multinational corporation 20 years ago, doesn't mean that you have to stick with that. Speak to your customers like you have a relationship with them. That's how you create relationships. By implementing some of these ideas and starting to think a little differently about your customers, you won't probably have people calling your manager to say how wonderful you are like the waitress at the restaurant I mentioned earlier, but hopefully you'll have your customers telling everyone about how wonderful your company is. So with that, I'm actually going to pass it back over to Paul, and I think we'll start our Q&A.
Thank you very much, Ian. Okay, now we have time to get to some live questions from our audience. Just want to remind everyone again that you can continue to ask questions during the Q&A session. And Richard is giving away a signed copy of his book, The Welcomer Edge, Unlocking the Secrets to Repeat Business, to a random participant who engages in the Q&A at the end of the presentation now. So feel free to put your questions in during the presentation so Richard and Ian can answer them, and we'll get right into them. First one I have up is directed toward Richard. And Richard, what can contact centers do beyond the welcomer experience to build the relationships that engender loyalty? In other words, what would the research say are good post-contact strategies to build relationships?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Well, I think in a lot of cases, when there is an issue or if somebody's a new customer, if you can send a letter or an email, a warm and welcoming email after that contact, maybe not that minute, but maybe like a week later or something, I think it would have a much greater impact. Saying, we know you had this issue. We hope that I hope that I personally solved it for you, and that's, once again, that's what our department is for. So not just leaving it at the end of the contact, but trying to do something post-contact. And, a written letter is still the most effective thing, I think. People really are surprised and appreciate that kind of, communication. So I think, some kind of post-communication, but not immediately after the contact, probably about a week after.
Great. Thank you. The next question I want to direct to Ian. And Ian, what would be the most effective way to show that we are customers with we are welcomers with the IVR messaging?
Well, I would say I touched on that a little bit,